All right, we've got Adam coming on. Hey, Adam,
Hey there.
how's it
There we
going?
go. It's going well. This is my first dual Insta Live. How's this working so far?
Well, you just changed my angle, so I got to change it back.
I had to do the same thing, yeah.
Hey, Knight, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for the interest in the book. It's
Yep.
exciting to actually be out here and talking about it instead of just like sitting heads down, just mashing away at the keyboard for months and months and months.
Yeah, trying to promote what you've been working on for months, if not years, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah, it's been about a 2.5 year, at least writing process, but as you can imagine, all the different ideas that found their way into the book, it's probably kind of a lifetime worth of tidbits that come across in conversations and podcasts and books, and some stuff that's in there attributed and some stuff just worked its way into my brain over the years. So
That's
yeah,
really, yeah, that's
it's
really
exciting.
cool. Yeah. So I received your book about, and I know it's inverted here. But I received your book about 2 days ago. I have had a chance to read about 50 pages, um, which I did last night. So I do have a
Amazing.
glimpse, and I really enjoy it. I'll continue to read it. I don't. I usually read whatever is relevant to my life at that time,
Yeah,
and I found this to be far more relevant than I expected. With everyone going through this unique time of being quarantined, um, there's a lot of things that you could start to implement in your life, and I think a lot of people's focus is starting to be on happiness more and more.
hmm,
And so, as
yeah,
you think about like happiness and little things you can do to improve your happiness, I think there's a lot of great takeaways in your book, and that's kind of why I wanted to have you on today. That, and also because all profits from the book are going to, is it Direct Relief, a
that's
charity,
right.
and then
Yeah.
future charities, depending on whatever the cause is.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me take those two things in order. I think, first of all, I'm super excited to hear that the book is resonating with you. I think, like probably a lot of authors right now who were who never planned on releasing their book in the middle of a global pandemic, but didn't really have much control over once the process of releasing a book starts, there's no stopping it. So I was a little bit wary of the book coming out right now, but I think on two levels, it's actually proven to be a really fortuitous timing. I mean, obviously, would never wish for these circumstances to descend on the planet, but here we are. On one hand, I think a lot of people can actually benefit from some of the practices that are in here the same way that these practices have benefited me. And I call them practices very much intentionally because they're not solutions, they're not prescriptions, they're not anything that I've figured out how to do even close to perfectly. But the more I think about them and the more I practice them, the more of an impact they have on my life. And so, things like finding moments of stillness and, um, you know, thinking differently about how you consume news and content, especially related to all things COVID-19. Little ideas like that have definitely helped me, and I think can help other people right now. But more broadly, I think this moment is causing a lot of people to rethink not just what they're going to do tomorrow, but the direction they want to send their lives in. And nobody's going to change their lives overnight. But I think this is a moment where people are saying, maybe I don't need to be so busy and productive all the time. Maybe there's a way that I can gauge my own self worth and value beyond just what did I accomplish? What's my next achievement? Am I working all the time? And I think this is a moment for reflection for a lot of people. And I think a book like this, again, by no decision of my own, just happens to be coming out at a time where people are open to hearing it. So,
Yeah, it seemed like it was less, you're trying to draw people away from a learned behavior, which
mhm,
is that you should, at least in the United States, I have this learned behavior that I should consistently be working to be more productive to achieve my career goal. And then you get in that situation where every day you're striving for that, but at the end of it, it's like there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty,
right,
and you may
right.
be spending years and years of your life for this very uncertain place that you may not even want. So that's one of the things I picked up on in this first chapter, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's very much a work in progress for me, like I think it is for any of us, especially, our generation who have grown up with an expectation of being, your value is that you put on yourself and that others put on you is based on how much you achieve and how much you work. Are you always available? Are you always online? Are you always busy? So I think that's particularly relevant to our generation because we've grown up with it, but it's by no means unique to us because it impacts most of the Western working world and a lot of people around the world as well. Um, and just related to this idea of that you mentioned of striving always for the next thing, in a world of uncertainty where you have really no control over most of the world around you, as this current moment reminds us. There is a chapter later in the book that you'll get to where, in which I urge people to have a trajectory and not a plan, because I write about how I made the, wouldn't call it a mistake because I learned a lot from it, but for a number of years I was single-mindedly obsessed with going back to my home state of Colorado and running for the state house in a certain district in a certain election cycle. And that was what I was going to do. It was going to be amazing. And, everything else in my life would follow from that. And that was the way I would be happy and fulfilled, as if I followed that plan. And it turned out, for a whole bunch of reasons that I write about in the book, that that was not the plan. Um, that was not what was going to bring me happiness, and I didn't follow through on that plan. But I did sacrifice a lot of opportunities and relationships with friends and family and things like that along the way because I was so focused on following this one fairly arbitrary path. And I've switched my thinking to think more about following a trajectory. So you're always want to be learning and improving and growing and moving generally in the right direction, but one of the most powerful things in life is fortune and luck and happenstance. And the more we are heads down on a single path, the more we give up that possibility of finding, who knows what, whether it's a person or a career opportunity. And again, I think this is one of those moments where nobody saw this coming for the most part, at least at this particular moment in history. And people are starting to think again, maybe I can do things a little bit differently.
Do you think your behavior of really focusing on productivity was learned behavior
I think
growing up?
so. Yeah, I think it's so. I cite, and you probably saw this in the first chapter where I cite Anne Helen Peterson, who's an amazing BuzzFeed news journalist who wrote a very viral article on millennials and millennial burnout in particular. Uh, I think January of 2019, and she says, and I'm paraphrasing pretty roughly here, but she's like, why am I, feeling guilty and burned out and exhausted all the time? It's basically because people have trained me and society has trained me. No one has sat me down and said, when you're working, you're a good person. When you're not working, you're a bad person. But those are the learned behaviors that we all absorb from, the trajectories we see people that we admire follow and what we're taught in school and all of these things. And she says, why do I feel this way? Because everything and everyone in my life has communicated this to me. It's not a malicious thing. This is a very systemic thing, and it's difficult to push back on it. And I recently published a new foreword to Reframe the Day just to talk about what it was like to publish a book in this particular moment. And I talk about how I have struggled enormously with all of the practices I write about over the last couple of months, but in particular, this one about being productive all the time. And even though I could be literally writing the words, your value is not dependent on how productive you are by whatever metric we want to use for productivity. For a lot of us, it's busyness. But I could literally be writing those words and still be beating myself up for not writing them more efficiently or productively or not making my way through the other 27 things on my to-do list, and which to me just reflects how ingrained this stuff is in our minds in our society and how difficult it is to try to move away from that.
Agreed. So what happened in your life? Did you have an epiphany? I know you talked about Aaron a lot in the book,
Mm-hmm.
your partner in
Yeah.
crime here. What happened? Was it a gradual? You gradually recognized that because of your relationship with Aaron?
The way I write about it in the book is that was and I shouldn't say that, she was the entity in my life who kind of sparked a broader and deeper reflection on other parts of how I was spending my time and living my days and thinking about my own trajectory. Um, but I think it was a combination of meeting and falling in love with her combined with my attempt to move away from DC into Colorado to try to live this one plan I'd become obsessed with. And then I would say failing, but I didn't fail because I pivoted away from that plan before I even had a chance to fail at it. So It was a combination of things that I think put me in a place where I could take a step back. And then the third thing is moving away from DC, where I worked in politics for about 8 years, and moving to the UK, where I had a little bit more work-life balance, a little bit more of a chance to see things done a different way, and an opportunity to just start writing and process some of the things in my head and think about, maybe a consistent meditation practice makes me feel like I have my feet on the ground and I'm a little bit more clear headed and present. What else gives me that same sensation? And then going through a long process, like all of us, of trial and error and figuring out, what brings us meaning and fulfillment and presence and stillness and contentment.
Wow.
And how can I, not do these things all of the time, but how can I try to nudge my life in a direction where I have a little bit more of those than I used to, and a little bit less of the stuff that doesn't give me that same feeling. So it's very much a journey.
Wow. I mean, we could go down that path if you'd want to. Um, I want people to understand what they can expect from reading your book. I
Yeah,
think we're touching on a lot of that here, but maybe you
yeah,
could give a general outline.
yeah, absolutely. And then let's come back to direct relief too, because I realize I took us off track when you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
Reframe Today is 10 practices not to change your life overnight, not to give you a silver bullet solution to being busy and stressed all the time. And I introduce it as sometimes what it's not, because I think it can, a lot of these self improvement, personal development, these types of books can all be grouped together as in all you're missing is the perfect life hack to do more, to find more time in your day, to wake up earlier and achieve more things so you have more time to strive for your goals. And I don't think any of those things alone are necessarily bad, but I realized, at least in my own case, that I spent 10 years thinking that what would make me happy was career advancement. And what I needed for career advancement was to find more time in the day to do more stuff and to check more items off my list. Um, Never really appreciating that the line that I thought I was working towards just kept moving further and further away from me. Um, so in a lot of ways, I say all of that because this is a self improvement book and it's listed as like happiness self help on Amazon or something like that. But I call it more of a tool for self reflection because I'm not saying in any of the 10 practices I talk about in this book, I'm not saying that this is going to change your life. All you have to do is do this, and then happiness and contentment and peace will follow for the rest of your life. These are 10 practices that, if you do them on a semi-consistent basis, and semi-consistent is about the best that I can do, then I think you'll start to see over time that your days are a little bit more fulfilling. And all you have to do then is just try to do a little bit better each day. So the goal here is to make it a manageable tool for self-reflection and building more fulfilling days by building an awareness practice and thinking about death and mortality, not all the time, but just a little bit more than we might typically do, by thinking of life as a craft rather than something that you have to get right, by recognizing the feeling of FOMO, the fear of missing out, that again all of us kind of grew up in an environment enhanced by social media where FOMO is prevalent pretty much all the time. I can't even imagine what it's like to be um, you know a young teenager right now. FOMO would be just deeply embedded in, because you're online all the time, and it's just about nudging each day in a more fulfilling direction by focusing on the practices and the way that you see your days. The little things that we can control, which is how we spend our time today and how we perceive the world around us, and then just trying to nudge each day in a slightly more fulfilling direction each
Yeah.
day.
Well, that's really relevant to me, and it's super powerful because you can't create expectation out of doing each of these individual things. Like you're putting yourself in a position where you're introducing all these kind of quality aspects or quality habits to your life that may ultimately make you feel happier, make you feel more fulfilled, or put you in a direction where you're just generally happier either the next day or a year later. But it isn't a
Mm-hmm.
magic pill. It's a gradual, it's a trial and error. It's like when
Yeah.
when you go on one of those diets and you need to try all these different foods to see what reacts best with your body.
Mm-hmm.
Similar to your habits in your life.
Yeah.
and I see that you touch on 10 of them here. Actually, those 10 are a lot of what you read about, but maybe when you read about them, they introduce it as if you do this, then you achieve this. But really, you're just saying these are 10 areas which I've learned have benefited me, and maybe you can try similar things to help benefit you and reframe your
Yeah.
day. Yeah.
I think that's well said. And the diet analogy is a good one on another level too, which is that I think, you know, when a lot of us introduce a diet into our lives, we go all in, read about it today, implement it 100% tomorrow, and then crash out of it by the end of the week because our, we're just not mentally, our lives don't allow us to make changes like that so radically. And it's just not sustainable. And like a diet that, the best diet that works for you is the one that you're going to stick with. And that's the way I think about these practices here, which is like with meditation, for instance, the best meditation practice that you have is the one that you're going to be able to maintain. The one that, if you do 30 minutes today and then don't do it again for a month, 30 minutes is great. But maybe if you just did a minute a day and turn that into a habit, that's probably going to be a lot more effective for you over the
Yeah.
long term. So that's the same mentality with all of these here, which is that we're all at different points in our lives. The books that I've found most transformative for me are the ones where I, go through and I pick out a little bit here and there of like, nah, that's not really relevant to me, but oh yeah, this, I see how that applies to me. Let me try implementing this in my own life a little bit today and tomorrow. And I wrote the book with that idea in mind, which is not that anyone will go through it and start doing these 10 things tomorrow, although that'd be great, but more that different people at different places in their lives will see different parts of the book and find hopefully that they resonate a little bit with them.
Sure. Yeah, I really love what you put out. It's refreshing for me. I just got done reading Blitzscaling, and I don't know if you've read
Mm-hmm.
it, but
No, I've heard of it though.
over the last 3 weeks, I've been like, man, I should really be implementing all these to be able to blitzscale the business, and that just puts this enormous expectation on you.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have that expectation, you actually end up doing far less. So if you
Right.
just gradually implement small things, then you end up in a far better place from what I've learned, which is a lot of what you're preaching in your book, or what you're trying to get across at least.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned expectations because that's something I've been thinking about a lot recently in particular, which is, and I think I read about this in an email newsletter, and I can't remember which one off the top of my head, but it was a reminder of the gap between expectation and reality in terms of how we spend our time and what we accomplish has a huge impact on how we feel about that particular day. And this obviously ties deeply into the conversation about being productive and measuring self-worth on productivity. But the idea that if you can set manageable expectations for what you can achieve, you are far more likely to achieve it and then have the momentum and a sense of accomplishment and fulfillment that comes with meeting those expectations rather than setting insane hyper productive expectations that you could never possibly achieve and then beating yourself up for of course not achieving them because it's not
Yeah,
impossible. So I feel like there's a lot there that I'm
yeah,
personally just beginning to think more about.
yeah, totally. Well, is there anything I know we want to touch on direct relief? And what we'll do maybe is I'll go about reading your book, and then we'll get on a call again,
Yeah.
and I can
Yeah.
talk about how this relates to my life a little bit.
Yeah,
Um,
let's definitely do a part two, and I would love to hear um, either now or maybe, like you said, after you've gone through the whole thing. In particular, what you've experienced over the last couple of months. I feel like these last few months have been a turning point for a lot of people. Not like a night and day turning point, but a turning point in the sense that coming out of this lockdown and global pandemic, how are you gonna just see your life goes maybe a little bit more in that direction as opposed to that direction, not like 180 degrees. And I would be very interested to hear what you're thinking about as you come out of this as someone who, is thinking about all these topics as well.
yeah. Well, the other thing is like with all this, everything that's been introduced to us is new. So being at home, almost every day, not being able
Mm-hmm.
to be social, which is something that's very humane. It's all very new, which means people are developing new habits and hobbies, and those could be positive or negative. So that's
Yeah.
what I love about your book is that it introduces you to a spread of different hobbies that you can do to potentially that may work for you. And
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed that you have to be a reader, I would think, because each of these different areas are things that you could read about in one single book, but you've tried to overlay them, across your book. So like I could pick up a
Yeah.
book on meditation and dive into it, but your book just introduces the concept of meditation. So then you can go try it yourself, see what you like, and then you can read another book, about different forms
Hmm.
of meditation. So I
Yeah.
think your book is very relevant right now. It's really cool. I appreciate you coming on here, and I'm happy to talk more about it. Um, you want to touch on direct relief because
Yeah.
I don't do many of these IG lives, and I wanted to get on with you because of this reason specifically.
Hmm.
And the book is called Reframe the Day. Someone just asked.
Yeah. Just head to
I wrote it backwards.
reframetheday.com, find all sorts of info about the book and all sorts of places to buy it. Uh, it's just went on sale on Tuesday, and for those who are interested in reading it right now, ebook is probably your best bet because there's all sorts of delays with shipping the print book. But a big shout out to Jesse Brown, a UK artist who designed the cover here and all the chapter illustrations, which, as always, show up a little bit better in print than on the ebook.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah,
really cool.
to Sean, reframetheday.com. Direct Relief is an organization, a global organization based in California. They do a ton of work around the world in primarily emergency response and poverty reduction. The reason I am partnering with them right now is because of the work that they're doing in terms of coronavirus response. They are around the world delivering PPE and all sorts of equipment to places that really, really need it. And they do so with a business model that is really focused not on, as some organizations are, doing big charity galas and things like that that add all sorts of overhead and suck up a ton of donations. They're really focused on actually getting supplies and equipment to where it needs to go when it needs to be there. So all of the profits from pre-orders, which ran until April 28th, and now all sales from here going forward are going directly to the coronavirus response efforts of Direct Relief. Everybody should check them out, directrelief.org. They're doing really, really amazing stuff. And I think at a time when a lot of us are trying to figure out, is there anything I can do to help people right now besides just stay home and be socially distant? My hope is that sales of this book here are not going to single-handedly keep an organization afloat, but my hope is that it gives folks a chance to feel like you're making, doing a tiny little bit of good by buying this book, not just for yourself, but for Direct Relief. And I think these days, if we can find little tiny levers where we feel like we're making a difference, I think that's really, really important.
So you're telling me I can donate to COVID-19, educate myself, and potentially completely reframe my day
Yep,
uh,
all you have to do is buy the book
all at
and then
once.
boom, problem solved.
That's awesome, man. Well, yeah, I love the mission. I love that you're donating all profits to this charity. It sounds like an awesome cause. Sounds like you'll continue to do that even after this whole thing hopefully passes us.
Hmm.
So I think it's really unique. It's a cool business model, and I appreciate you coming on today. We'll continue
Yeah,
these conversations once I get a chance to read the entirety of the book.
absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And I appreciate what you do. I appreciate so much what the Bookstagram community does to just, I mean, there's one of the scale of things that have to do with reading number one, talking about reading number two. So I feel like the community that you guys provide right now is hugely resourceful and helpful for a lot of folks, myself included. So let's do round two after you get through the book sometime in the next couple of weeks here.
Yeah, just to add something, Adam. We launched this page called Book Thinkers Family. I don't know if you've seen it yet,
I have, yeah,
but
yeah.
that is something that right now I'm passionate about because I love hearing how reading impacts people around the world that are in completely different circumstances. So
Hmm.
from my perspective, I'm 28 years old. I live in Newport, Rhode Island. I have this totally different worldview. I read different books than what somebody else may be in, India or London. Uh, their perspective may share because even in
Hmm.
London, you have somebody who has a totally different lifestyle than somebody else reading a
Right.
totally different type of book. So if anything, like I would love to see you on that page because we're trying to promote that as much as possible. I think it's super cool and it's going to be a fun page for years to come.
Yeah, I think it's great, and it's both fun and a service, and I think that's the goal for finding something that sticks over the long term is making it fun and enjoyable and fulfilling as well as creating something good. So
Exactly.
yes to all the above. Let's keep the conversation going, and thanks again for having me on to talk about the book.
All right, man. Sounds good. Well,
Excellent.
have a nice night. It's nighttime in London, right?
It's getting there. It's getting there, 5 hours ahead. So hope you stay
Yeah.
safe, and everybody still watching, stay safe and healthy and at home and socially distant, and read lots of books. And buy
Thanks.
Reframe Today. I should get my own plug in there,
Yeah. Read
reframetoday.com.
Refame today.
Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
I appreciate it, Adam.
Thanks,
Have a
Ryan.
great
We'll do it
evening.
again soon.
All right. Sounds good. Cheers.
Bye.